Hi there, my name is Johnny Meatsack. Like you, I once held a normal life in a normal place with a normal job. I had a normal family. Hi, Karen. And simply thought I'd live my normal life to a normal death. One day, however, I experienced this thing called Gnosis. A direct revelation of a truer but distant reality, and the realization that my reality was a fabricated construct. I discovered my life was a lie and my identity was as synthetic as Alexa or Siri. And that the universe itself was a penitentiary built by cosmic overlords to trap and feed off my dormant, authentic consciousness. Jiminy crickets, I thought. My only choices were to join an awareness-killing cult like a political party or just kill myself. But by some luck or providence, Sophia's grace, I discovered Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio. Despite the host's creepy monologues and the show's blasphemous topics, I was able to develop the ability to uncover my authentic consciousness and deal with this prison planet. In other words, this gnosis grew until I was a fully divine being, no longer in the thrall of entities called archons and their soul-numbing, amnesia-causing powers. Thank you, Aeon Byte, for waking me up to my true eternal nature. Everything is still normal these days, except me, Johnny Meatsack. I'm on the adventure of many lifetimes to be completely liberated from the Black Iron Prison. Welcome, everybody, to Aeon Byte, and welcome to the show on what is Gnosticism. Although that intro clip I just played, I think, does a good job. I could probably drop my mic, but no, we got an exciting show with some amazing minds when it comes to Gnosticism and the esoterica. Great researchers that bring so much to the table and really give us new vistas on the ever evolving thought or phenomena or modality called Gnosticism. So very excited about today. Happy Saturday. Happy Saturn Day. My name is Miguel Connor. I am your Pompatus of Gnosis, and we are all Johnny Meatsacks here. All of us are men who still have nipples, and we're still trying to figure that out, but that's what we'll do today. So great to see everybody. I see people already in the chat. I'll keep repeating this. This is a good show. If you have any questions about Gnosticism, I still get a lot of emails every week, but this is your chance to ask anything you want to know. Please super chat them. And let's make sure there's no Watico in the Chatico, as we like to say here. Not much else. House cleaning. Great shows coming next week. We'll have a show on the first female pharaoh. Our guest will be Andrew Collins. He's got this cool theory that it's not his theory, but he's researched how Gnosticism might be even older, not just older than Christianity, but might have started in some way like around 1800 BCE with Sobek Neferu, I'm misspelling her name, and this weird Egyptian dynasty that had some weird ideas and actually was right before Akhenaten. But we'll get to that next week. But that's the fun. Things keep evolving. So with us today, we'll start. First of all, we've got Ike Baker, whose excellent documentary, What is Gnosticism, Part 1 and 2, I highly recommend. Ike, please say hello and maybe introduce yourself a little bit.
Hello, I'm Ike Baker. Miguel, thanks for having me on. I'm a big fan of this show for a long time now. And yeah, like Miguel said, I've been putting out content on my YouTube channel, Arcanum. I believe there's a link to that. And it ranges from Gnosticism. I recently did some episodes on Neoplatonism. The two are obviously very intricately intertwined. And my background is that I'm actually not a man of letters. I'm not a Platonic scholar. I'm not a Gnostic scholar. I am primarily a ceremonial magician in the tradition of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and an occultist. And I came to Gnosticism through those kinds of Western esoteric initiatic lineages. And so I'm here today to kind of powwow and talk. I'm very excited to be with everyone in this chat. Thank you so much for having me.
Great to have you here. And I'm sure somebody's always talking about, oh, what about people saying Gnosticism is satanic? Of course, we can deal with it. And of course, maybe Ike will say, well, duh. No, just kidding. With us, too, we've got Alex Rivera, who's put out some amazing books and continues to put out some amazing articles. Even recently, I put a YouTube short based on his work with Tracy Twyman that connects Baphomet and Sophia. And needless to say, I got a lot of blowback, mostly from modern Gnostic communities, because how dare you associate Baphomet and Sophia? Unfortunately, we still live in a world where people think that Sophia or the goddess is sort of a non-Christian version of the Virgin Mary, and she's got to be perfect. And but that's not classical. Alex, welcome, and please tell the audience a little bit more about yourself and where can I need more coffee. Where they can find more about your heresy.
Sure. So, first of all, yes, my name is Alex Rivera, and I did co-wrote a book with Tracy Twyman a while back in 2015, about the subject of the Baphomet. But lately, I've been more interested in my own work. Where I wrote a couple books actually. One is called The Sunlighting Unveiled, which you can find on Amazon. You can find it on my website called theaeoneye.com. It's been a while since I updated the website, but that's besides the point. But I also wrote another book that came out recently. It's called The Laurel Turns Green. Yeah, so it has like well, this one's really more about like it's a different collection of articles I wrote for my website a while back, and then I decided just to put them all together into one book again, because I deleted them, and then I like, wait a minute, it's pretty good stuff, so let me just let's republish it, so you know, make it more accessible for people. But yeah, but this one was really very much interconnected with the Sophia archetype, of course. It does connect with, well, obviously the Book of Revelation. You know, I get into all kinds of stuff in that book, like, you know, the Kabbalah, a lot of the Sumerian and Babylonian origins of you know, Judaism. So I mean, would I consider myself like a man of letters? I mean, I guess so, kind of. But I mean, I have other interests besides that, of course. You know, so like, you know, I do other things, like, you know, I do work, of course, full time. I mean, I wish I would dedicate more of my time. Heilig stuff, yeah. You know, just like, you know, family, you know, stuff like that. But you know, religion always been very much been a interest of mine for quite a while. And then also, I mean, I've been also dovetailing to other things, like, you know, even like, you know, magic and prayer work and healing stuff. So it's like, you know, I'm always learning about everything. So I guess I tend to be a little obsessive in that way, but I'm always trying to like evolve myself, my consciousness. So that's how I am.
Awesome. Yeah, Alex's work is great beyond the great research. He always gives us a holistic view of Gnosticism and other disciplines from ancient times to the present to secret society. So you get the whole enchilada, if you want to put it together. So awesome. with us too. Yeah, I'm not a man of letters except for ASS. Thought I'd put that out. But we also have Lord Sobek, who, again, like everybody here, just puts me to shame with an amazing grasp of Gnosticism and late antiquity religions. Tell us about yourself, man.
Well, first of all, thank you for that, Miguel. I will put my check in the mail to you. Um, yeah, my handle on YouTube, I'm kind of stuck with. It was started as a joke, and like so many things, you're kind of stuck with it. Name brand recognition, for better or for worse. So yes, Lord Sobek. But I just call me Jason. No, Dr. Lit was like, yeah, I'm not going to call you Lord Sobek. So none of the scholars do. So don't worry about it. So Miguel, first off, I want to thank you for inviting me to the virtual Alexandria. It's an honor. Big fan of the show. Like when you came on my show, when we talked to Robin Faith Walsh for a while, like I introduced you, you are like the David Bowie of the frontmen of the Red Pill Online. So, I just, I don't know. I guess I have an okay grasp of Gnosticism. I just want to preface this by saying, even though I have a academic background in religious studies and history, I'm not like PhD'd or degreed in that sense, like even a Miroshnikov or anybody like that. I'm just a guy in my office and studying on my off time. So it's just a passion of mine, I guess. I have a channel called We Are Being Transformed, taken from M. David Litwa's book, We Are Being Transformed, which is about Paul's soteriology. I use the title because it seemed to be a good kind of analogy for his model of dynamic cultural exchange. And I think one of the problems in not just like Ivy League scholarship, but like on YouTube is that people on either side, whether it's religious studies and the Christianity history side or the classics and the mythology side of like Greece and Rome and the mystery religions, things like that, they tend to want to vacuum seal those things off from each other. So my show is about everything. Like I was saying, you know, Neoplatonism and Sethian Christians go like, peanut butter and jelly at certain times. Those people were in Plotinus's lectures, arguing. I mean, they wouldn't be writing treatises in the hundreds of pages against them if they weren't like important and participating in their culture. That's one of the things I hope we do with the show today, just in terms of like breaking the misconception that Gnosticism, like some people have mentioned, is a thing that's very much like purposely cutting itself off from the rest of the world. Certainly they're using that rhetoric like a lot of early Christian and Jesus movements do, but they wouldn't be doing that if there were other people around and like who were maybe a little bit too into, going to all the festivals and the sacrifices and eating the meat, right? So yeah, check out We Are Being Transformed. It's not, there's a lot of Gnosticism. I've talked to people, the names like Dylan Burns, David Brackey, but none as far as like Miguel. Miguel like has talked to everybody, right? John Turner, Karen King,
Rest in peace.
April DeConnick, all the greats. By the way, hook me up with that one, Miguel, if you can. No, I'm kidding. I'll mortgage all my stuff for that interview. But yeah, just check it out. We got stuff on. I geek out on the classics a lot. I got stuff on Greek novels, Paideia. Extremely important if you're an educated person in the ancient world. Paideia is extremely important. And of course, I've talked on both sides of the issue with people like Dylan Burns, David Brackey, M. David Litwa about Gnosticism as a term. So sorry for the long-winded introduction. Moondog, I always love seeing you on the show and your contributions. And nice to meet you, Alex and Ike. Graham, I know you. Thank you for your support and all your great contributions always in the chats and discussions. So thank you all for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Pleasure's all ours. Yeah, I love your channel. And yes, we've discussed the term Gnosticism and all that good stuff. And like sometimes I try to use the term Alexandrian offworlders because I think, yeah, none of these groups, Gnostics, Neoplatonic, Hermeticists, Alchemists, probably wouldn't have existed if they weren't interacting and fighting. And all of us, I'm sure, here, if we had a time machine, one of our top 5 destinations would be Alexandria around 100 AD, just to hang out and see what's going on there. So it
Yeah,
was
it's
amazing
just
time.
yeah, if I could put like just a little thing on there, like I love that because just imagine you're going through the marketplace. Say you're like going through the marketplace of Alexandria. You have people with Greek magical papyri right here next to the dude who's selling his mystery cult here and there's like
Right.
the Sethian Gnostic, and then maybe there's the Orthodox Christian on the other side,
Yeah.
and the
Unemployed
Bacchus cult,
Egyptian
so
priest. Yeah.
yeah,
Everybody
yeah.
just
All
hanging out.
these religious specialists, people interpreting your dreams, wild time, huge diversity. So
Yeah, it would be a blast. But yeah, well, we try to recreate it here. And with us too, we've got a man who needs no introduction, probably the most damned soul in the universe, and that's Grandpa. Graham, how are you?
Oh, trying to get as undamned as possible. No, I was going to say, as I say, I'm here for comic relief for the most part. I can, in Gnosticism, I consider myself sort of somewhere between apprentice and journeyman. You know, my specialty, official degrees economics, had the apprenticeship in math under Dr. Hilton. I did the show with Miguel
Yeah.
on earlier this year. And since 2019, been involved in various different research projects that always researching, never actually finishing the book. I've got a bunch of snippets out on some of my Homo divinus stuff with, again, an alternate, species of, of basically the genus Homo from Southeast Asia. I've done a
Mhm.
deep dive recently that I haven't gotten a lot formalized and out on the Abrahamic religions and their origin and interrelations, and lots of research here and there. Always great to see Jason. Known him for a few years here. Not as many as Miguel, I think. Are we actually up to 20 yet?
I think
We
we're
might.
getting close to 20. Yeah. Back in the PHP era, the forums back then when we'd have our little chats.
Exactly. Long before the thought of anything like YouTube ever came up. So, I got more coming out here. Got to do some more work with Miguel, figuring out how to properly structure it and present it. And looking forward to a lot of groundbreaking material coming out for me coming up here. And
Awesome.
tagging on out.
We look forward to it, especially your ideas on how Christianity came about will blow people away. Hopefully, we'll have that sooner rather than later. And with us too, we've got the Moondog Vance. Vance, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm fine. Happy to be here with all these illustrious guests and waiting to hear all the Gnosis from the Gnostics. And Gnosis is kind of like a jewel. What shape is a cut diamond? What shape is so many facets, right? It's a word. We rally around the word. So it brings us together, that just one word. It's very powerful. And what I'll say about it right here at the start is it is the one thing that kind of puts us on the side of taking our journey rather than being led by a tour guide like in the Grand Canyon, right? He sits you on a donkey and sends you down there, tells you what he wants you to know, and that's the end of it. Well, we're into exploring. We're explorers. We explore the universe and the mysteries of life ourselves, not without help, of course. So
Well
that's
said. Yeah.
yeah.
Indeed, yeah. Experience it. As Charles Stein said on the show, the text is the secret. Only you will interpret it the way you are, and it will affect your life. And it's not nothing like cause and effects or linear. Like for example, in Ike's documentary, great documentary, but in one part, I got a great insight because I think you quote Hesiod saying that the only animal the lion is afraid of is the rooster. And I was like, whoa, great. That's another stream of Abraxas. And there's no one stream of Abraxas, but these things, just like Superman there's many streams to Superman or any modern mythology. And as you learn these streams, it enriches your lives because you understand what they were doing. And yeah, very cool. A living thing. Religions are living.
Indeed.
So again, if you have a question in the Chatico, please super chat them, because there's already a lot of people and we want to try to get to you. But first, I just wanted to start with a quick definition from Chat GPT, simply because, again, people are always asking about what is Gnosticism. So I came up with this little corny video today, and I will read it for you. Here it is. Okay. Gnosticism is an ancient spiritual belief system that suggests the world we see is not the ultimate reality. It emphasizes the idea that hidden knowledge, or gnosis, can lead to a deeper understanding of existence and one's connection to a higher divine realm. Gnostics believe that this world is flawed and created by a lesser, sometimes malevolent deity, and true enlightenment comes from recognizing and transcending its limitations. The focus on personal experience and inner awakening rather than rigid religious structures. Gnosticism has had various forms throughout history and has influenced a range of religions and philosophies. It's like a secret path to wisdom where seekers aim to uncover profound truths that go beyond the surface of everyday life. So what do you guys think? Yay or nay on the Archon giving us a definition of Gnosticism?
That's a yay, for sure.
Sounds good to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it just pulls from, it's good at pulling from other places. So
Right.
So I think it's a good definition. Now I wanted to play too, as we set things up, this video that Ike sent. It's part of his documentary. We couldn't play other parts because trade copyright and whatever. Even 2 days ago, I got nailed by YouTube when we had Ian, because we played a music video. Phil Collins. I mean, I understand I'm being punished for listening to Phil Collins, but give me a break. But anyway, here is the video, and we can talk a little bit about this too.
In the ancient Egyptian conception, a human being was metaphysically multifaceted. They were comprised of several aspects contributing to their overall spiritual architecture. These aspects, or quote-unquote layers, existed coterminously, interpenetrating and having a hierarchical influence on one another. These were divided typically into at least 9 separate divisions, which we'll pare down by focusing on 3: the Ket, Ka, and Ba. The Ket was the physical body of a person, which was the physical quote-unquote ground or focal point, a kind of center of gravity and anchor for the various subtle aspects of the larger composite organism. The Ka was an exact replica of a person, comprised of the substance of quote-unquote life force. This was later referred to in theosophical circles as the quote-unquote etheric double. The Ba was represented hieroglyphically by a human-headed bird, which traveled through the terrestrial realm and the celestial realms while a person was alive, as well as after their death. In an alchemical context, these can be corresponded to the 3 philosophical essentials of salt, mercury, and sulfur, body, spirit, and soul, respectively.
Good stuff there, Ike. Yeah, I love it. And it was a sync, as I was telling you, because Vance and I did a interview with a Freemason who's trying to get back to the foundation of Freemasonry, the Philosopher's Stone, and he figured it out and everything else. But in his book, there's a section where he talks about the Egyptians. When we fall asleep, the Ka stays and the Ba goes floating around in the Jung would love that. And sometimes Egyptians had to write the names on their bed or their tomb so that the Ka would remember before dawn, or the Ba wakes up to come back to the body instead of just floating there. So tell us about this section. Is this, you think, relates to the Gnostic idea of hylic, pneumatic, and psychic bodies?
That's basically what I was trying to get at in some of that stuff. Again, I had to I had to actually pull that from my Patreon account because, like you're saying, copyright stuff. So I was attempting to get at that, but also what the lead in was towards is the idea of, I guess, ritualistic rectification, which we find in theurgy, right? Neoplatonic theurgy, and also in, at least we could surmise, because we don't really have the actual details, the ritual forms of either theurgy or the early Christian ritual stuff. We get bits and pieces, but it kind of transfers over into early Gnosticism, you know, in terms of parallels, like the sequential baptisms in like the book of Yao and that sort of stuff. So that's kind of where I was going with it, because within the paradigm of the Western esoteric traditions, particularly ceremonially, theurgy is that kind of alchemical process which has to be undergone repeatedly and frequently. It becomes a lifestyle, essentially, that is sort of, well, not sort of, but it's our conception or our way of transcending the wash and dry cycle of samsara here, if I could put it that way, you know, and it in a sense, once that path is undergone, you begin expediting karma, which, you know, I use Eastern terms because they're more immediately accessible, but there's a rich Greek tradition for this kind of stuff. For instance, in the Greek term anagke, which a lot of people translate as necessity, it means constraint. And when you find it in Plato's The Republic in Book 10, the myth of the spindle of anagke, really what's being discussed is this karmic mechanism of the universe, and how a soul, a ba, is bound, right, to a daimon, and then further into physical materiality. So in the Western initiatic traditions, really the end goal is the theurgic union with the higher, I guess some people would call it the bornless aspect of your spiritual architecture. And so all of my channel is kind of, you know, it's still early on. I've only been doing this since, I've been studying this stuff for 20 years. I've been an initiate for almost 10. But my channel has only really been around since, I want to say, January. So I'm still laying the foundations for this kind of stuff, and telling people, you know, the relevant parts, insights from a practitioner, rather than just kind of the rote accumulation of scholarly stuff, which is there too, right? Because I have to rely on that. I don't want to go off into, I don't want to go too far off into woo-woo world, but that's really what my channel and what my work is geared towards, is teaching people about the, you know, magical practices and where they come from in the Western esoteric tradition and what specifically they're trying to do.
Yeah, and great job, a great channel. Anybody else want to speak to this, or perhaps speak to the origins of Gnosticism, or want to jump in and dispelling misconceptions about Gnosticism? Again, anybody can jump in at any time.
Maybe we should attack the satanic accusation that was often filed against us.
I did want to comment on what Ike said about the three different aspects of the soul. With that video, I know in the Kabbalah they talk about the three mother letters. So like in the Sefer Yetzirah, so you have like this that connects to, I think it's like sulfur, mercury, and some other one I'm missing out. But basically that makes up, you know, the entire matrix of our existence here, you know. So I mean, but you know, those mother letters connect with, you know, the divine feminine, you know, which could also connects with Sophia, and I guess you can say Barbello and all this kind of stuff. But I mean that's what all these Gnostics were getting at. You know, we're trying to get in touch with the feminine part of our multiverse, basically. So basically, like in the Kabbalah, they talk about Bina, and it's on the I think it's on the left side, the left pillar, right? So Bina is like represented by the high priestess. I know I'm getting off tangent here, but
That's great.
the high priestess, that's like the ruler of the universe, basically. So so that also connects to that connects to Saturn, and then you can say Saturn's also like an aspect of the demiurge, or is the demiurge, so it's very, I know it's very convoluted if you haven't really studied this kind of stuff for a while, but yeah, I just want to mention that it does remind me of the three mother letters. So
Yeah, and it also from a hermetic Kabbalistic perspective, yeah, Aleph is the sort of Aleph would be spiritual fire, so sulfur. Mem would be the salt, the body. That's the feminine, and then Shin would be the fire. I'm sorry, Shin would be the fire. Mem would be the so Shin would be sulfur. Mem would be salt, and then Aleph would be the balance between them, Mercury, which is really interesting because you even get back to Plotinus's concept of the three hypostases.
Right.
Yeah.
Really, right here, the active, positive, and then the receptive, negative, and that balance between them, that Mercury, that neutral, or really combination of both. It's not bereft of active or positive. It contains both of them. So it goes really far back. I mean, I kind of operate under the assumption that it goes even further than that, further back than that. But I haven't come across anything exactly outside of mythology, right? There's lots of familial trinities in ancient Egypt. You had Ra, Khonsu, and Mut, and they would do their procession during the Opet ceremony in the New Kingdom of Egypt down in Thebes. So yeah, this stuff has been around for a while, and I kind of understand where the Satanism thing comes from. I definitely think we should attack that, because
Sure.
for a really long time, yeah, there was. I mean, since Christianities really came to the fore, they've been jockeying for orthodoxy and for authority, and unfortunately, they didn't. The Gnostics kind of got, I don't want to say wiped out, but Valentinus did not win the bishop position of Rome. So we have this kind of like this clerical force or authority that's been trying to knock this opposing, I guess, soteriological or cosmological worldview just off the playing field. And I think a lot of that has to do, it gets mixed in during the Middle Ages. There's a lot of just superstition in general surrounding clerical authority. And what's really interesting is you see in the Renaissance, a theologian, a scholar in Henry Cornelius Agrippa, who finds all this, right? He's got all this new material. The Corpus Hermeticum had just been translated. The works of Plato had just been translated. And the works of the Neoplatonists had just been translated largely by Marsilio Ficino. And so he starts drawing on these things and rescuing that sort of folk superstition. And really, by his own words, he admits that what I'm trying to do with this whole trajectory is reconstruct or rehabilitate this divine theurgic model of ascension. He called it perfection in the divine mind, nous. But essentially what it was starting in the material and, going further. It's this route of ascension that we constantly see throughout history. I think that is, if anything, I want to say not the subtext, but like that hidden through line, that underground stream in all esotericism.
Yeah, well said. I mean, the idea, the Gnostic idea, it is Luciferian. I mean, there's this ancient myth going way back, even with the Anunnaki, of some rebellious goddess. You've got Cybele, who either is androgynous and either castrates herself or the other gods castrate, and there's this fall, and the Gnostics are tapping into this great fall that is just part of creation, like you said, Ike. It's just the way it is, and this goes on in so many other religions and traditions. But then Christianity comes, and well, even before that, Plato, the fall of the soul, the high adventure. I mean, the Odyssey, some people said, is just Ellen of Troy is just the soul's adventure through matter and her restoration back to where it begins. But then comes Christianity and says, no, that's bad. Just being trapped in a garden and screwing things yourself is what it is. And it sort of takes away that really poetic beauty of the fall of the soul and the adventure into matter that we see everywhere else. And just decides to basically create Lucifer or Satan out of whole cloth when it comes down to it. I mean, it's an older, or you might say a newer theology, this idea of Satan and hell and all that. As Robert Price said, there's no evidence in the Bible that Satan is even in hell. He's a principality of the air. He has his own duties and jobs like everybody else in the universe. So.
As well as God's lawyer, right?
Yeah, that's part of his job. Yeah,
Book of Job.
Perry Mason.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it also comes from the Ophites, who were snake worshippers, so quote unquote, right? So revering the snake as tempter in that Edenic mythology of the fall. So yeah, of course, Orthodox Christians are going to be like, they're rooting for the bad guy.
Mm-hmm. And again, there's many streams going through this. Like I mentioned, the lion and the rooster. For those of you who want to live in this sort of cause and effect, and this is how, but there's many streams and you got to get yourself into this sort of mythological, symbolical mind to really get it. That's how you get Gnosticism, Neoplatonism. That's how you really enjoy the richness of Christianity, Judaism, any of those religions out there. So, that's certainly important. What I like too is that I remember in the debate with Bart Ehrman and Robert Price at Mythicist Milwaukee, and I think now it's 10 years. And don't get me wrong, I love Bart Ehrman's just a great guy to hang out with and all that. And he sort of was flipping to Robert Price like, oh, are you still on that outdated term about Gnosticism being influenced by Egyptian lore and Zoroastrianism? Now it's turned because, again, scholars like David Litwa, Dylan Burns, April DeConnick are like, it is so obvious that Gnosticism and Hermeticism tap directly into Egyptian mysticism. They're the heirs of this sort of tradition. So again, things always change. So any comments on the origins of Gnosticism, pre-Christian, where it came from?
I mean, yeah, just imagine like you have the hotbed in Alexandria, which is in Egypt, right? And then
Right.
we're supposed to say, yeah, that's totally insulated and has nothing to do with the milieu in which it grew up. I think if it's possible, can I just touch upon like the satanic misconceptions really quickly?
Please do.
Just from a historical standpoint, I think lately the misconceptions come from this apologetic standpoint that Gnosticism is a 2nd century deviation from an original proto-orthodoxy. And I think that Walter Bauer showed in the early 20th century pretty conclusively that diversity preceded orthodoxy. It's like any other thing. Like, do you have Judaism or Judaisms and different types of Judaism at the time? It's like any other religion. So like, the problem is that I think where we get off topic is when, first off, we think that it's deviating from an orthodoxy, which creates a value judgment, right? Like Litwa always says, right, Miguel?
Mm-hmm. Right.
It creates a value judgment about who gets to be counted in this conversation and whose ideas are important and matter, right? I think that the problem is whenever they call it a deviation, we tend to miss what's rich about this subject on its own terms, right? And even when you delve deeper into the term Gnosticism, I used to be with, sorry, Dr. Litwa, please forgive me. I used to very much be
throwing his beer at the screen right now.
I used to very much be on the side of, yes, Gnosticism is really problematic term, and in some ways I think it still is. But after talking to people like Dylan Burns and David Brackey, I really think that there was a group, which we'll call, for lack of a better term, Sethian Gnostics, who did refer to themselves as that, and that, like Dylan Burns said when I talked to him about it, it's not sufficient to call them Christian or Sethian. They're, they're Gnostic, that term applies. So I think that there's values in all the different, certainly negative demiurgy like Litwa has, or biblical demiurgy like Michael Allen Williams proposed, are important. But I think that for certain of these groups, especially the Sethians, like Gnostic is a very, not just a convenient term, but I think it's pretty necessary to understand where they're coming from as the immovable race, or the seed of Seth, right? So, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to hijack that.
No. Good point. I think that's a good point. Again, there are no such thing as ideal boxes or perfect types. You do the best you can. I think it was Dan McClellan once said, from his teacher, he said, the map is not the territory. All models are probably wrong. Some models are useful. I think the Gnosticism model is, it's useful right now. So I would agree it helps more than hinders. So.
Yeah, plus the emphasis is right there in the root of the term, Gnosis. This is what kind of, I mean, we don't technically know what that Gnosis was, but I believe, I'm not sure what the conference was titled or anything like that, but I remember reading a while ago in that sort of anthology volume, Neoplatonism and Gnosticism, edited by Richard Wallace. In the beginning of that, so that came out a while ago, but in the introduction to that, I believe that he mentions a group of scholars would be meeting to discuss, the pre-Christian origins of Gnosticism. And more recently, I've read some material that says that over the course of those conferences, those academic conferences that happened in 2 sessions over the course of many years, they did establish at least somewhat of a consensus, agreeing that there were a group of pre-Christian philosophers, what have you, that referred to themselves as Gnostics. And they were out of some iteration of the Platonic school. The Platonic school, for me, that's as far as I can, myself, reliably go back with the historical record. But I'm definitely interested to check out that episode that you're talking about, that there was some sort of Egyptian dynasty connected.
That's next week. Andrew Collins, yeah. And I think when I talked to April DeConnick at the Astronosis conference, we were actually in a car driving to a restaurant, and she said, the origins of Gnosticism, whether it's earlier than pre-Christian, it's a wrong question we're asking, because they were the heirs of this ancient Hermetic magic, or as some people said, more cynical, they were out of work Egyptian priests, and they were like, hey, look at those Hellenistic Jews and pagans, hey, we'll be your life coach, and we'll give you this hundreds, thousands of years magical theological thing. So it's not earlier or later. It's like, for example, if you went to another planet, you met an alien species, you're Catholic, and they're like, oh, we love Catholicism. And you gave them all the theology, rituals, all that, and this alien species, and then you left, and this alien species started practicing Catholicism, but they would change a few things because of their atmosphere and culture. Is this a new religion? Is it a continuation of a religion? Or is it an ancient religion? See, it can be all three and still work. So the idea of Gnosticism being earlier or later than Christianity is the wrong question, according to April. I agree with that.
Yeah,
you're 100% right there. That's the one thing that I keep noticing is the whole wrangling over definitions as opposed to meanings. And that's where so much of this boils down to. And again, and that's the problem with understanding Satan versus Lucifer versus Ahriman. They're all so conflated in so much of the modern mind. And it's tough to sit there and try to untangle that jumbled, ball of whatever you want to call it in your head that you put together about these things and set those definitions straight. And so much of it's like a Hegelian synthesis where you have two opposing forces that are both underneath a larger umbrella. And this ties back to the very sense of, Gnosticism, because what is Gnosis versus the other types of knowledge? And it's usually something that goes by meaning as opposed to definition. And that's so much of what they're doing in their writing is trying to put words and definitions to those Gnostic experience, those transcendent experiences they were having. Going to tag out on that.
Well said. I agree.
Great point, Graham. If I could add something to that,
Sure.
possibly. Yeah, Graham, you're totally right. It creates, not only creates value judgments, but also and wrangling over definitions and which came first and what's borrowing, or as some people in the community like to kind of really hammer home, who's stealing from who, right? Is that the right question to ask? I mean, with Litwit's concept of, dynamic cultural exchange, borrowing is often very unconscious. You're in an ether, it's in the ether, in the air, so to speak. I think the problem is, whenever you start being married to these terms, what happens is you lose sight of the richness, like even within the groups themselves that you find in Nag Hammadi, right? All the texts, the different texts reflect different people. Like there's even, just going back to the Hermetic stuff, there's Hermetic stuff in the Corpus Hermetica, and whoever, regardless of whoever put these codices together,
The book of Genesis is in the Corpus Hermetica. Most people don't realize.
they have Plato in there, right? It's crazy. So, whoever, regardless, let's just say hypothetically, it was like an Orthodox monk who got this put together, or some rich bookseller or book collector. They're still finding value in this, and they're not seeing the divisions that we're seeing today. So it's very important to look at them all on a case by case basis and what the texts and what the ideas tell us. That's what I think. So I'll tag out on there. Sorry to interrupt, Graham.
Oh no, please do. Please keep contributing. This is really good stuff too. Vince, what do you think? Any questions? I don't see any super chats.
Oh, there are no super chats, but there's a lot of discussion about
Good.
Satan and a lot of good points about the Satan versus Lucifer versus the devil, and as many of us that have been Gnostics throughout the year have been exposed to.
Yeah. Well, I saw people talking of, and they're of course mentioning something I thought I'd bring up later, but we might as well deal with it now, and that is the modern polemics that are happening with Gnosticism, and the ghost of Voiglin is being resuscitated because it just makes money. And yes, it's the old Jan Kuliano, where Nazism is Gnosticism, communism's Gnostic, everything's Gnosticism, everything I don't like is Gnosticism.
Right.
It's the boogeyman. So I wanted to play this quick video and then hit the ground running with it. Here it is. And it's sort of also on YouTube Shorts. It's nasty things that people said about the Gnostics. Here it is.
Nasty things said about the Gnostics. A nasty-minded adolescent of somewhat pornographic tendencies. Henry Chadwick, church historian. I call Gnosticism the gospel of narcissism. Ben Witherington 3. Even Satan himself never went to the extreme as the Gnostics did by denouncing the creator of everything in the way that they did. Bishop Irenaeus of Lyons, paraphrased from Against Heresies. Gnosticism is a parasitic cult religion. It shapes itself around whatever else it can steal from. James Lindsay. Those jerks trigger me. God.
All right. I thought it would be a good setup. I do agree with the first part about pornographic tendencies. I'm sorry, but sex was an important part of ancient Egyptian theology. The Gnostics, as April DeConnick has said, are shamanistic. They're into ecstatic, altered states of mind. So the body is going to participate in this sort of altered states rhapsody thing. Is just the way it is. Even when I'm writing my Elvis book, the Pentecostals were accused by the rest of America of toying with sexuality, and they were. I mean, again, Pentecostalism was all about shamanistic altered state shaking, and people in the 40s and 50s hated because they were just touching each other and whatever. And of course, Elvis simply borrowed that shamanistic thing and joined spirituality and sexuality, like Prince. Prince's whole music is that tension between sexuality and God. And that's what the Gnostics were doing in a lot of their groups. So it's inevitable. Yeah, he was again one of the great androgynous shamans of our era, along with Elvis, Bowie, Mick Jagger, and all those other guys. Michael Jackson, of course. But the other thing too is, of course, we're talking about Satan. Yeah, Irenaeus is pissed off because he thinks at least Satan kind of respects the creator God, and the Gnostics won't even give him that. So to Irenaeus, the Gnostics are worse than the devil. So I guess that settles it, guys. And Gnosticism isn't satanic; it's worse than Satanism.
Right.
Yeah,
Satan hates us.
Yeah, exactly. Rosemary's other baby, redheaded stepson baby, maybe something like that. But and then comes James Lindsay, because he has been very popular. I mean, he's like huge following. He is he's different than others because he is an atheist. He doesn't really care for Christianity, but he has been going on the Vogelin thing that the Gnostics, again, that postmodernism, Marxism, Nazism is all just modern incarnations of Gnosticism. I'll give them that there are Gnostic elements in there. I don't have a problem with that because, again, a lot of these draw from German idealism and neo-paganism, which does tap into, Hegel and all that does, it overlaps with a lot of Gnostic thought. But I'd like to hear your ideas on James Lindsay. I would have no problem debating him. He's an intelligent guy, but he's completely wrong on this. My only argument about how these groups are Gnostics is very simple. It's this: Gnosticism has never been utopian. So that destroys his argument right there. There's no utopian ideal according to the Gnostics, it's all dystopian, right? We are in a dystopia and there's no way out. The earth is going to do what the earth is going to do. So Gnosticism is social. It's all about, improving yourself for interpersonal relationships, being a good member of the community. You see that in their texts and their rituals. It's a personal religion about how you can be the best version of yourself, but it is not utopian. So that destroys his argument right there, I would say. Yeah, that's really, and then the other one he says too, which you saw in the quote, guys, it says it's parasitic. That's another big misconception about the Gnostics, is that Gnosticism is not a religion. It's what April calls it, a metaphysical orientation or a spiritual modality. For example, shamanism, monastic life, those are not religions. Those are spiritual modalities that are part of many religions. You have different religions have a shamanistic or a monastic order with it. Buddhism, indigenous religions. And these are not they're not religions, but they are part of a religion. The monastic life, the shamanistic aspect, and there is a Gnostic aspect too. So Gnosticism is not parasitic. It's like saying shamanism and the monastic life are they're not. It's just a normal choice that religions might take for whatever reasons to thrive. So it's not, so that's why you can have Sufism or Kabbalah, which are the more shamanistic, speculative, anarchist part of a religion. So that's my second argument. But please, guys, let me know where else James is wrong for the audience, because it's very popular and it's a huge misconception right now.
Well, just to backtrack for a second, I really appreciate what you had said about, and starting off about this idea that really anybody can call anything Gnostic. You know, you can like if you right, it's that age old thing. If you're a hammer, every problem is a nail.
Right.
And that's what I see happening a lot everywhere, right? In this kind of socio-political dialogue, in spiritual dialogues, magical, religious dialogues, everything is Gnostic. I mean, it's a bracket term, and that is the thing that I guess that's why I lean on the term Gnosticism, but also I'm constantly trying to accompany that with earlier forms of Gnosticism, because then I have something to point to and say like, no, this is Gnosticism. You know, even if it's completely arbitrary, because like you just said, there's a tremendous metaphysical component. I mean, you look at everything. There's nothing in the world that you could look at and not be thinking of, you know, either the pleroma or you know, how this is the Hylic illusion and things like that under the Gnostic worldview. And I think that really boils down to, I love that definition that April gave you. I think that's fantastic, because it speaks to again, going back to the subjective objective dilemma. There's just certain things that, you know, there's a gate that you get to in spiritual pursuit. And that gate takes you out of the mundane, material, discursive kind of navel contemplation and into the broader, you know, experience of what it means to be a human potentially. And you have to be willing to go there. You can't be fettered to the names and the signs and that stuff. You have to be able to put that down, take it back up, but put it down in order to pass through that gate into the experiential, mystical. And that's the whole thing. I think that, right, we can say that what defines the Gnostics is Gnosis itself. But what is that Gnosis? You know, nobody can really tell us. Perhaps the cosmology that they espoused had something to do with that Gnosis, but ultimately it was a highly personal experience. And to me, I feel like Gnosticism is if anything at its heart, I think it decentralizes this groupthink and moves the locus of authority to the individual.
I like that.
I was going to say I agree 100%. They'll brand just about anything as Gnostic these days, especially if they can make a buck. I mean, I've got some great Gnostic pans I love. So, you know, I think where the guy goes wrong here is he's confusing with a modern movement that grew out of very much the whole self-help spirituality movement that's gone toxic, where it's sort of like the old 70s book. You may remember this one. You're old like me. The I'm okay, you're okay.
Oh yeah.
Now it's become I'm perfect, you're a piece of shite. And what that toxic, it's that it doesn't respect traditions. It doesn't respect anything but its own. It's a narcissistic movement that's out for only its own goals, doesn't care who it hurts, and it'll grab anything that it can to try to further it. And it's grabbed a lot of Gnosticism and tried to, at the same time, use that to further its end and to undermine the Gnosticism. So I think where the guy may have some valid points, both about the modern movement, and again, some of the members of the ancient movement did go much farther than what a lot of modern people are comfortable with.
Right.
I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, I think more of his focus is he's confusing the modern, you know, toxic self-help spirituality movement, narcissism, with the old school, you know, 2nd, 3rd century Gnostics. Tagging again.
Exactly. What about you, Alex? What do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, Gnosticism has always been like this great boogeyman of Orthodox Christianity. You know, it's been like that for a long time. You know, there's a book by Edith Starr, I believe. She wrote a book called Occult Theocracy, which talks about how a lot of these subversive movements come from, you know, Gnosticism, and of course, you know, then she traces Gnosticism with, like, you know, spiritism and all this occult kind of stuff, and of course, in that perspective, that's it's all negative, of course, right? But but then you see the people like James, what's his name? James Lindsay, I
Lindsay.
think. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he thinks like, I watched his video. He was saying like, the woke cult is very much a Gnostic movement, which I find laughable, because well, like he was also insinuating like, Fauci was like some sort of like evil Gnostic prophet or something, and then he's like,
Whatever.
I'm like,
Sure.
I don't know where it gets at, but okay. But the thing is like the Gnostics themselves would have like probably would consider like, the woke cult, the wokesters, like to be Hylics. So and like in Gnosticism. Ooh, look, here's my kitty.
Bast approves. The goddess
Yeah.
Bast approves.
Just so basically, Gnosticism, espouses that the material has to be, transcended and abandoned, right? Whereas, the woke, embraces the material as fundamental to the identity of that individual, So, I mean, so that's why all these wokesters, modify their. I mean, okay, I'm gonna get into like a little controversy here, but might as well do it. We're already discussing controversial subjects here, but like you see all these wokesters modify their bodies and change their gender pronouns, to conform to their inner whatever image they have in their heads, right? So their hormones and reproductive organs, are part of their self, right? So they have to modify the body to conform to that inner self. So like the Gnostics, on the other hand, they saw the body as transitory and illusory, So I just kind of get like sick of
Yeah, but androgyny
know?
is important to these ancient Gnostics. It's an energy you play within yourself.
Right.
I like that, but again, it's something that's an inner process.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
For sure.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
we all want to become androgynous, spiritual. You know what I mean? We want to reach that beyond anima and animus kind
Yeah,
of stuff.
and that right there comes straight out of Hermetism by way of the philosophy of alchemy. Right,
Yeah.
that's the whole thing, the alchemical rebus, the marriage of Sol and Luna. But I do find it. I like very much like your points, Alex. And I think also that there is something to be said, like you're saying. How could an atheist talk about metaphysics? Their assessment of it automatically is going to be completely biased because they don't believe in any of it. So it's going to be, it's going to be a negation the whole way through. And people like that, or I should say, worldviews like that, perspective lenses like that, which are essentially, trained into our brains the same way water trains grooves through rock. They inhibit everyone. They inhibit people from being able to look at anything outside of the material, most base Hylic manifestation. And so that is the essence of postmodernism. There is no truth. There's no truth because there's nothing that transcends the physical. And it's very unfortunate. To me, I view postmodernism as literally a spiritual sickness in our time, and it's the symptoms of that sickness are things like what you're pointing out, and just this general I'm perfect and you're a piece of shite. Right. All of these things are symptomatic of this inner issue of like, I'm not going to engage in that, which is really the feminine aspect, the anima, the soul aspect. I'm not going to have an experience of that in this life because it's not real. And to me, that's Satanism.
Yeah. It's inhibiting your true potential, basically. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, well, I was just kind of basically getting at that. I get sort of like sick of this kind of talk, with like this guy Lindsay blaming everything on the Gnostics, because they haven't really been alive for almost 2,000 years. So it's like they're still creating controversy, So we just, just just gives them like how we have to give them credit to how controversial they really were, So they it's just like I'm sure not just created controversy and like Christianity, but less like in paganism and Judaism,
Buddhism,
Buddhism,
everywhere. Yeah.
Hermeticism is So there are. So I mean, they piss a lot of people off. So
The
yeah.
Manichaeans, the Cathars, they get secular governments bent out of shape and religious one, and that's a good point too, Alex, because this is what Chris Knowles said, is because Lindsay's going, oh yeah, again, it's destroying our society, yada yada yada, but Chris Knowles is like, well, let's look at the almost unbroken lineage of Gnosticism today. And he said, well, let's look at the Mandeans and the Yazidi, the nicest, pacifist, good people who are still getting beaten up by everybody. That's, if you want to say that, you want to look at Gnostics today, look at them. Are they a threat? No. So another argument that kind of another reason his argument doesn't make any sense.
The worst racket is the people who claim they know something about consciousness saying there's no such thing, right? The neurologist, there's no such thing as, well, what are you? Why should I even listen to you, right? What are you? Just a machine that says there's no such thing as consciousness? That's really where it boils down to. The one thing we all experience, allegedly, that people can actually still deny.
Yeah.
The cult of death. Yeah, I think we have to watch out, because whether it's Lindsay or other things, there is a cult of death that's moving, and it appears to be on opposing views, but it all leads to the same thing. No consciousness, no individuality, no borders. And yeah, it's a complete Borg-like nihilistic movement, Vance. And I think that's, talk about the real enemy, because people have another misconception about Gnosticism is that, oh, they just wanted to transcend the flesh and this and that. No. Again, they're not utopian. The Gnostics were always part of society. They paid their taxes, went biking, whatever. They were never out there trying to bring things down. I mean, maybe a couple of exceptions, but political weird times. But the other one is that they wanted to transcend the world, which is not true. They wanted to gain this, like any shaman, gain this knowledge in the spirit world and the world of ideas, and then bring this knowledge and become more human, more whole. It's the old Hermetic idea that humans have a special place with the gods and the animals. We're not better than the gods and the animals, but we have a special humanness that we have to attain and tap into to be part of the cosmos. And the Christian Gnostics had the same attitude, as like, we need to come back, and then how are we going to heal others? Are we going to heal others with our hands? Are we going to give them herbs? Are we going to talk about their psychic problems, try to heal their psyches? Are we going to, it's all about being a better human being. And that's a huge misconception that it still goes on, even in modern Gnostic things. I mean, Heaven's Gate had Gnostic elements, but it just missed that little part about you're not supposed to jump on the comet. You're supposed to come back from the comet with the Gnosis to help your tribe out.
So, yeah, look at Zostrianos, right? And the book
Bingo.
of Zostrianos, when these figures and like Zostrianos and Allogenes and things like that, when they're doing their ascent, and they're taking on these principalities and powers and gaining all this knowledge, what do they do at the end?
Pulling angels.
They're
like
there?
beating, but they're like beating up angels to come back.
And what are they doing at the end? They're coming back down. They're preaching to everybody. You wake up, and I think that's the problem. I apologize. I apologize. I don't really follow apologists or people like James Lindsay. I look at it from a more academic perspective, but I think the problem, just from that video that you that short that you showed, Miguel, that he put out, is that I think it tends to not look at the nuances of the, like I said, the groups themselves, and to just create like a boogeyman. It's another carpocration situation, right? Where it's like, oh, these people are having orgies and eating babies and things like that. It's another boogeyman. But the problem, like you mentioned, like it tends to miss the dynamic and groundbreaking ideas that Gnosticism brings, right? For me, the core of Gnosticism and why I love it so much is not this world denying kind of caricature. For me, I love the transgressive countercultural aspect of the Gnostic idea. The way that, as April put it in the book Gnostic New Age, it can revolutionize and innovate your religious and just everyday existence, right? You're
Mhm.
fighting against the archons, that basic kernel, like Karen King says. Apocryphon of John is not just about this weird cosmogony. That's empire critical stuff, right? They're talking about
Right, right.
things, and they're using building blocks from the mythology of the Roman Empire, and they're turning that on their head. In like normal Roman mythology, you have a lot of dominating trigger warning sexual assault myths.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then the iconography of the Roman Empire is all about, like, the Caesar is penetrating the barbarians and the passive quote unquote feminine. And the Gnostic cosmogony, as you find in Secret Book of John, turns all that on its head. It makes the archons look like idiots. They're like Beavis and Butthead, compared to somebody like like Noria, something like that. It's and that for me is the kernel of Gnosticism. That's why I love it. It's a countercultural. It's not just like certain groups and ideas in time, because even Clement of Alexandria, I think he uses the term Gnostic and applying it to Christians more than anybody in the Nag Hammadi library in his own writings. I'm reading a book by David Brackey on the monk versus the demon for my discussion with him, and even then, the monk is supposed to attain a gnosis to fight the demons who are entrepping on his life. And it's just crazy. But like, the core of the message is, I mean, it's a story. That story in the Apocryphon of John is the same as you find it today. Miguel and I were talking about movies when he came on my show that one time, and we were talking about some of our favorite Gnostic myths, and the story is still there, right? Even in the Lego movie, obviously in the Matrix. Barbie just made $1 billion, right? And Barbie is basically the same story. You realize that the world
Oh,
that you are inhabited in is not the world that you thought it was, and you have to come to terms with that and become something better. So
oh,
I
wow.
think that people like James Lindsay, I believe that's what his name is, they just missed the point, and the richness that we can gain from these writings and these groups, and just how in a world back then when you're at the mercy of fate and you have no say in your life. You're a slave, whether you like it or not, to this guy. You may
Right.
have been an educated Greek, say, the Romans come through, they pillage your town, you're a slave. It doesn't matter how good you were at, writing and rhetoric, you're going to be a slave to that guy. You're in a world where you have no say over your fate. And, Gnosticism, alternative Christianities, but I'm just going to say Gnosticism because I'm getting more okay with that term, so I'm just going to say it. But yeah, these provide like a really radical. It's like Hermeticism, like Ike was talking about Hermeticism. Wouter Honoraff wrote a book, Hermeticism and the Western Imagination, and he
Mhm.
argued that Hermeticism offered almost like an ancient psychiatric practice for people to cleanse themselves of like
No.
the world and become something better than themselves. And I think that's what you're seeing in these texts in Nag Hammadi. So I think people like Lindsay are just trying to create boogeymen and to make money and grift. So
Bingo. I mean, yeah, you can make a lot of money from the Gnostics, weaponizing Gnosticism. I mean, I'll give it to them. Scientology, even Marxism, uses Gnostic elements and weaponizes them because it works. It just works. I mean,
Yeah, so somebody recently, I think I saw somebody post in, they might have super chatted or something like that, but about how about scapegoating, and that kind of goes back to my point is to go back actually to something that you said, Miguel, earlier about coming back after the ascent, not complete transcendence, but coming back down. I don't think it's a secret for anyone who follows, the studies, the things that I study, and the organizations that I'm a part of. but the inner order of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, right, Hermetic, right there, it becomes Rosicrucian. And in the Rosicrucian manifestos, there is an admonition, or really an oath, that each of the Rosicrucian brothers have to take. And among their certain duties and obligations is to wear the clothing of the country in which they reside. Exactly what you're saying. Pay your taxes. Don't be, performing miracles in the square, or, sending out too much. And when anyone asks you what you do for a living, how do you make your money? You tell them, I heal the sick, and that gratis, for free. And the Rosicrucian magic in the inner order of the Golden Dawn is theurgic in nature. It is that ascent, but it also kind of follows this hero's journey. And at one point, right, at like I guess you want to say the nadir of the journey is the abyss, is death, from which you come back reborn. You come back, right? You have to come back. And it's in that sort of abyss experience. Let's put it in a Gnostic ascent term, or theurgic, Neoplatonic, being taken up to the 8th sphere, the Ogdoad, and having an experience there. That experience is yours. That experience, you don't come back and try and convert people to your experience, but you have that experience there. And it's a very personal thing. And I think that Gnosticism and the paths to that spiritual experience, that personal, intimate experience, inform the way in which we come back. And like you're saying, to teach us how to be in the world, so that we don't scapegoat, so that we're not constantly pointing our fingers at these guys are screwing everything up. This is, but like, and I'm not even trying to take like this stoic path of like self-accountability. Yes, that's important, clearly. But what I mean is that you understand, you have an actual visceral, real experience that, it's me. It's the internal. That's how I heal the world. That's how I go forward. This is how I have to be in the world. It's the purification has to happen in me, not everywhere outside of me. And then everybody that, hopefully your sphere of influence, you help, in some species, one way or another, to begin their journey towards that. Hopefully, right? That's not necessarily what you're aiming for, but I think that is a consequence of that type of transmutation. Is people that come within the sphere of somebody who has experienced that are almost automatically initiated on that path.
Well said. Very inspirational. Love it. Well,
took a lot of the words out of my mouth. Just real quick here is, I think there's the difference between ascension versus transcension. And the point of Gnosticism is to transcend and to see yourself as part of the whole and use that for your insights. And what these people are confusing is ascension, where you basically, exit stage up and just skedaddle out of this lousy world. Tag.
Well said indeed. Well, Vince, I have to step out. Last time I left, I have to check on the dogs because want to make sure they're okay. Because with these pit bull mixes, is like you stop them way ahead, because if they fight, once they lock, then it's like hours trying to get them unlocked. So I need to check on the dogs. You want to get to the super chat and see if the group wants to answer them, and I'll be right back.
Definitely.
In a minute.
We got one that's a direct question, which is, could Gnosticism have its own origin with the Mandean John the Baptist, with his movement headquartered in Alexandria, mingling with intellectuals? Wants to address that question.
I think what we were talking about earlier was, and these are just my thoughts, right? I don't have anything definitive, conclusive, but what we're talking about was, there's this overarching tradition. I think Miguel really hit the nail on the head earlier, that moves from place to place and group to group. And I think that's the way it moves through time. That's the way it is transmitted to the present day for us to be able to speak about it and have some of these experiences. So I'm not certain if Gnosticism would have its origin as late as John the Baptist. I think it existed before that in some permutation, but I definitely see Mandaism as a continuation of that tradition. Absolutely, for me,
Right.
I think it's one of the purest versions of the transition or transmission through time.
I think it's pretty possible that a lot of the Gnostic movements kind of dovetailed from John the Baptist. I mean, if you read like the Clementine homilies or the Clementine literature, that it gets into that quite a bit. Like, you know, how Simon the magician was a student or even a son of John the Baptist. Like, I think they refer to themselves as Day Baptist or something like that. But I think there are like 30 students under John, and I think like maybe Jesus was one of them, possibly. Perhaps even Simon and Jesus knew each other. That's also possible. Um, I mean, there's a lot of like people out there like kind of sort of conflate the two, but I mean, there's definitely some correlations, similarities. But I think it is possible, especially if you like read the Clementine literature, it does point to that direction, yeah. But you know, of course, the Clementine stuff is very much in more of a Catholic literature. But if you read like the debates between Simon and Peter, he kind of asserts that he's like Simon is the real McCoy here, you know. So, but then Peter is like, he got his tradition from Jesus Christ himself, so it's like a whole big debate. So, but anyway,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a
I
big
think it
topic,
does.
sure.
Yeah, but yeah, I think John. Yeah, I think there's some reason to believe that John is indeed like a fountainhead of Gnosticism for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to say, right? Because, what's in the Bible in the New Testament, it seems to, is subject to the charge of being kind of jimmied around to make Jesus look greater than John, right? So, and to have the Christ movement supersede John the Baptist movement.
Yeah, the other thing too is as April talks in her book, she makes an argument you can trace the Mandeas to the 1st century to a woman who's their founder. So that's how old it can be. Of course, her name is Mary because everybody and their dog was named Mary back then, or Simon. So it's frustrating because it's Mary, but you can trace the Mandeans. There is an argument to be made that they are very, very old.
I'm comfortable saying that there's no doubt that John was involved in the early Gnostic movement. I don't know if I could pin him as the founder, but he was certainly one of the early ones and took it into a spin that was much more towards the Christian, angle and Gnostic angle as we now know it. Tag.
I would agree. And also, even more intriguing, Tobias Churton in his book, The Mysteries of John the Baptist. Speaking of somebody who should be a scholar because he's that intelligent, but he makes the argument that John the Baptist and Jesus were part of this Nazarene group, and he traces the word to watchers. They were the watcher of the watchers. They were basically Nephilim hunters. I know it'd make a cool movie, right? But when you start thinking about it, it makes more and more sense because if you read Paul through a Gnostic lens, he is obsessed with the watchers and the archons and he says, women, cover yourself because watchers are just like walking by the door, like looking for chicks, So you start realizing that and when you realize how important the book of Enoch was and how covered and suppressed it was, you start realizing that, yeah, maybe early Gnosticism and Christianity was a huge part of it, was dealing with the watchers because they really were that afraid that the world had come into the hands of these bad angels and they were mating and they were just screwing things up. And it was these awakened ones like Jesus and John the Baptist and Simon who had to like change the world. And Paul might have been part of this group. So I think it's a fascinating theory. And the more it comes out, the more it becomes even more valid, I would say.
Okay. Ruth also did a super chat, and she didn't have a specific question, but she was appreciating the idea of porn, sexuality, being involved with ecstasy, as you can see by the end there, lineage from Egypt. If anybody wants to say anything more about that.
Ruth is a
Now's the
very
time.
cool chick. She's so cool. Yeah, I don't know if anybody wants to say right now I'm kind of worried because I know again Chris Knowles and some others like Steven Snyder have been doing research, and the Sufis they have kind of a dark side, PEDO side. So I've got to look into that before I go into it. But yeah, definitely again, when you get into ecstasy, your body's gonna follow. I mean, shamanism, whether it's Gnostic, Siberian, the body is part of it, and of course, again, the Egyptians were very much into sex magic, which the Gnostics took. But anybody else want to talk to it, please do.
Yeah, and on the broader scale, the misconception about Gnostics that they were totally asexual and they believed in not having sexual relationships so that you didn't bring any more people into the evil world, right?
Yeah, Syncretism was very popular. It was like a fad. So some of the Gnostic groups did, and it's always I think the Thomasine Christians decided, like Acts of Thomas, they decided maybe we're going to take the monastic life. It's the best way to do it. And that's fine. It's, they decided that was their choice. So, but this is again probably more of a Palestinian, Mesopotamian kind of movement, with the Encratic side.
Yeah,
Not Egyptian.
I can see going both ways because I think the Gnostics were concerned about the sparks that were trapped in the world. They weren't concerned about the world. So why did they want to come back to the world? Not so much because they liked the world, because the world was a prison, but they were concerned about the sparks trapped within the world. They wanted to come and help them achieve Gnosis. I don't know what the end game was, though. That's an interesting question.
Mm-hmm. Being a better human.
Yeah, the
Go
divine
ahead.
spark stuff is also very present in Manichaeism, and
Mm-hmm.
if you look at Lurianic Kabbalah, Isaac Luria, he was very much he was talking about that quite a bit too. How, and then even like in the New Testament, I mean, like it sort of like reflects that kind of idea with this. I know Jesus talks about like the eye, the light in the eye, or sorry, it's kind of it's been a long day, but how the like there's like there is like this divine spark within your within you, and then like heaven, the kingdom of heaven is within you, and then but really I think all this the what they're really trying to get at is like there's like basically we're all part of this divine emanation called the atom and catamon. So we're kind of like separated from that. We're basically, so what it's very convoluted, but if you look at like the Manichaean myths, they talk about how the primal man was harvested, it fell from heaven, and then the archons took over and then took his light and then was spread around throughout the universe. So then we're all like have each of these different sparks. So our job as like, or like the Lurianic Kabbalists would say, is to gather all the light sparks through like different holy acts and stuff like that, theurgy, to become a sparky kind of dude or kind of person, So yeah, but anyway, that's kind of my own.
That whole thing, like you're talking about the Lurianic Kabbalah, and I think believe he calls it the Tikkun HaOlam, the restoration of the elements of the universe, the eons, really. I mean, just as an aside, because it's kind of my area of experience. That's the underlying through line through most of the Western esoteric lineages, initiatic lineages, like the Golden Dawn or Martinism, things like the Elu Cohen. What's always really how I came to Gnosticism was through reading the reintegration the treatise on the reintegration of beings by Martinez de Pasquale.
Mm-hmm.
And it just blew my mind that in the 1700s, this guy who was writing in like phonetic French, because that's what it wasn't his first language. He was like delineating Sethian Gnosticism, and like those texts wouldn't have been available to him, which kind of blows my mind. So again, my brain, I guess, graphs to the patterns, and I see this thing continuing through time, and it definitely has attributes that are definable. You know, you can sort of point to consonances or harmonies or things that they all commonalities really in from Gnosticism to, as you're saying, Lurianic Kabbalah to the modern Golden Dawn and things like that. That's I think traditions like that put you in a position to be able to experience this for yourself and not just kind of like, oh, it's dead, it's old, I'll read about it. You know, it's like, no, I'm in a lineage that claims to be, you know, even if a little bit of it is this kind of encouraging cosplay. It's just, you know, like I'm in a lineage that is doing this, that is undergoing this. It can be really, I think, inspirational and informative.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what Isaac was saying, that we're sort of like a mix of like positive and negative sparks, sort of like some like a good person might be like 90% have light sparks and then maybe like 10% negative, something like that. But or the opposite. I think that's what he was saying. But
that's kind of like the Greek. They had the Agatho diamond, the guide of good counsel, and they had the Kako diamond, the guide of bad counsel. And it's again, right? It's
the
that
angel and the devil on your show.
We still have it. These ideas are still with us.
Yeah. It's the Lurianic Kabbalah is very advanced, so I mean that's a whole other topic. But that's just kind of reminding what Vance kind of triggered my memory there.
Yeah, Isaac Lurie is amazing. Love his stuff. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, and I guess the other thing I wanted to talk about. Do we get to all the super chats, man?
Yeah.
All right, I got to see the Barbie movie. I'm gonna wait till it's out on streaming. I don't want to.
Is it possible for me to add something to that, though, Miguel?
Yeah, please do. Of course. Go ahead, Jason.
No, it's just been kind of. I wanted to address the first super chat.
Sure.
I think just from a historical perspective, I think the evidence for it is a bit late to link the Manichaean or the Mandeans and Gnosticism as a genetically cogent group, but like there's a scholar named James McGrath who does a lot of work on the Mandeans that you might be interested in to look at. He does a lot of work on that if you're interested. The other one just was mentioning the and I see a lot of it in the chat, and that's why I kind of wanted to bring it up. And Ike brought up Manichaeism, and so did Alex. And I just, whenever I hear that, I perk up. I'm like, oh, I want to talk about Manny a little bit. So, no, it's just the Islamic stuff about the mysticism and its similarities to Gnostic spirituality. It's I don't think it's a mistake, or I don't think it's a coincidence, because during this period of time you have the works of Aristotle, or so they thought, but it was actually Plotinus's stuff, right? So Plotinus, they thought Plotinus's work was Aristotle, and they're reading Plotinus's mystical works, and they're attributing it to Aristotle. And there's no coincidence that Neoplatonic kind of, theurgy is more of a Yamblichian thing, but like there's still a mystical, spiritual aspect, obviously, to Plotinus, and they're using that, and that's why you get such a huge influence. Rat King, I've seen you mention that a bit in the chat, so I just wanted to add that. Manichaeism is another great example of like this really cosmological. Like Miguel has talked to the expert on Manichaeism, right? Jason Badoon. Love that interview you did with him, by the way. He talks about how Manny grew up in an apocalyptic Jewish sect, the Alkacites, right? And he's using that cosmogony, and he's melding everything together. He really created like the world's first, like, put everything in a pot and let's see what we come up with. It's just fascinating. Yeah, he just combined kind of everything, and he said, you know what, it's all valid, it's all working. And I just love the concept of the light and the darkness and the people, as I believe Alex was mentioning, or Ike was mentioning, the theurgical aspects of returning the light to whence it came, and kind of healing the world that way. And I just love that imagery, and it really shows, antiquity is not like, these things aren't vacuum sealed, from each other. They're all taking from the same thing. Like even in Hermetic stuff, like the Poimandres, you have a fall too, right? But the difference there is, as Voucher Honograph would say, it's like a love story. Like
Mm.
the light looks up and it sees the primal man and it falls in love and it wants to be with it. So it's it just really depends on perspective. So sorry, tangents, but I
No,
love these
beautiful.
conversations. So
Beautifully said. And yeah, you were talking about James McGrath. And of course, speaking of how old Gnosticism is, when I had him and he talked about his paper, he finds out that the Mandean language, the use of gods and angels, is pre-exilic Israel. That's how old the Mandeans are tapping into. And he thinks it's logic. And then you bring in Margaret Barker, and I'm sorry, but if Margaret Barker has a gut feeling about something or research, I mean, she's the GOAT as far as I'm concerned. She says that all Gnosticism is a concealed crypto hiding of the cult of Ashera that was smuggled. Sophia's Ashera, the Aeons are these angels of Israel, and it was basically smuggled. So James McGrath and Margaret Barker are saying, yeah, it was kind of smuggled. Obviously, a lot of these Israelites or Jews went to Alexandria, started talking to Egyptian priests, and then suddenly this fusion, or you know what I mean, this Gnostic vibe started appearing. So another argument that the Gnostics are even older than people think, even though they're not. Again, it's neither or. It's just tapping into very ancient, shamanistic, animistic traditions, if you would.
Yeah, and they're all, there is again, they're all saying similar things, but just different, using different analogies, using different mythic or symbolic sort of narratives. And that's another thing that I see in Plotinus. That's really, it's very interesting that they were reading Plotinus as Aristotle, which is like, now it's completely different. We know that he was like, the empiricist and the logician and stuff. And Plotinus was highly mystical, but even he says it there, the idea that the soul becomes enmeshed in highly, and that's the negative aspect. And that's what kind of pulls us down. That's the negative polarity. Negative, not as a value judgment, but more like, it's, again, it's that falling in love, that venturing to the he would say the objectification of the contents of the divine mind, and then getting kind of enmeshed. And that's, kind of what we were talking about with the positive and negative sparks, the agathodaimen, the cacodaimen. It's just ways of talking about this thing that happened, where somehow spirit is enmeshed in the material.
No, I agree. We've been dancing around him, but I'm going to give a shout out to Maimonides, because he got caught in that whole Plotinus as actually being Aristotle mistake as well. But he did such a phenomenal synthesis of basically everything into, Guide to the Perplexed and his other writings. It was like, didn't really matter. He just brought it all together. And I definitely see that all of the Gnostics, they're drawing from a common mystical insight. And again, it's one I share. I recognize it in him, because I wonder just what sort of predecessors Hildegard of Bingen was drawing from, because she, nails it with her whole fractal cosmology and everything like that. And, it's like, I can't imagine where she was getting her stuff other than like personal experience. Taken out.
Yo, Hildegard's my girl. Thank you for bringing her up. She deserves to be mentioned here.
Indeed. Something I see from the chat too in several places is, of course, the idea of, again, I don't want to get into the Who Made Who, the AC/DC song, but about Gnosticism and Buddhism. And obviously, there's the trope, 300 BCE, King Asaka was sending people to Alexandria. But of course, we all know that once the Persian Empire came, the first modern empire, the world shrank, and you had people like Heraclitus and Pythagoras in the Persian Empire. So of course, all these ideas were coming together. But what do you guys think when it comes to reincarnation and Buddhism and Gnosticism? I think you deal with it recently, didn't you, Jason?
As far as, you mean like in terms of it found in Philo as an example?
Yeah, reincarnation coming to the West, or was it, or?
Well, I think the consensus
For the record,
is,
the Gnostics were mostly into reincarnation too. So just telling the audience that, but go ahead.
yeah, we're going to get a little bit simplified here, but it's a bit more nuanced. But like, yeah, a lot of them did see reincarnation, but it wasn't like a positive thing. It was like we're stuck in this matter. But
like the
to
Buddhists.
be fair, yeah, and to be fair, that's found in Plato, right? That's found in
Right.
Plato. That's
Yep.
found in Pythagoras. So it's not like the Gnostics were original in this situation. I think the problem is like, I mean, Plato, don't get me wrong, Plato and Philo both viewed reincarnation not so much negative, but as like a learning experience, right? You have to keep, I can't remember exactly how long Plato said you had to be reincarnated, but it was quite a while. It was like thousands of years before you could ascend back to that. So I guess we're screwed in that sense. If this is my first,
Well, we'd be outside of
I don't feel enlightened. Closer.
But yeah, as far as reincarnation goes, I believe that the consensus right now is that this really comes from Pythagoras and from later incorporations of Pythagorean thought into things like Middle and then later Neoplatonism. I think out of all the philosophical groups at that time, schools, kind of like we're talking about heresies, right? Heresy just means heresis is just school in Greek, right? So the heresy hunters are doing the same thing as like a Diogenes Laertius, right? They're just creating a succession because that's how the philosophers do it. They're like, this guy was this smart guy who taught these guys who were other smart guys who did this, and then they did that. So people like Irenaeus are just kind of taking that and running with it because they're a product again of their time, right? They're paideia. So, well, like just as far as like reincarnation, yeah, I was talking to Earl Fontenelle from the Schwepp, my favorite frontman of all time. Sorry, everybody, but like Earl from Secret History of Western
Great
Western
podcast,
Esotericism Pastas. Yeah, he's just my like he's like I was not even going to start my show because I'm like I don't even think I could like touch that. So
he's great.
But you know, I'm just doing my own thing. But I take a lot of inspiration from Earl and yeah, I talked to him and David, Dr. Litwa about this and. Because Dr. Litwa has a section in his book on the concept in Philo. And Philo, regardless of what people want to say, who want to like sanitize Philo and say he means this or that, Philo very much believed in reincarnation. Philo very, very much mentions this. I mean, Philo reconciles the two creation stories in Genesis by using the Timaeus. Because he's like, well, there was a creation on this plane of existence, and then there was another creation by the craftsman, the demiurge. Because demiurge, we think of demiurge now, and we think of like, oh, it's like this evil, sinister thing. But like, demiurge is just like for Plato, just meant like a creator, just meant like a guy who like works on stuff. It's kind of like in a, I'm getting back to Hermeticism, but like Poimandres, right? They call it. When Poimandres is like the primal kind of man created on that higher level, and he entered. I did an interview with Justin Sledge about Poimandres, and it was called "Entering the Craftsman's Sphere." So it's just the craftsman's space, like so. Right. It's just but you know, of course, the Gnostics kind of made that more negative. But I don't think they innovated the reincarnation aspect. I think they just took it from what would have been considered the great minds and philosophy of their time. So Stoics, and you know, Stoics view the world as cyclical, finite, then everything starts again, right? Like George Boystones would say. But there's always like a reincarnation, and especially in Middle Platonism, then later, obviously, it gets really wild in Iamblichus, right? Ike? Reincarnation. Yeah, Iamblichus is the goat.
Yeah, I see a lot
as far as all that's concerned. So.
I see a lot of reincarnation throughout the Platonic lineage. Obviously, Plato talks about it in the Phaedrus. He calls it's metempsychosis is the Greek term for reincarnation. But I also see the possibility of these things kind of also coming through Ammonius Saccas, and this whole kind of contested idea that his name was more of an epithet for the Scythian sage, and he obviously taught Plotinus, and Plotinus is his. If you read the Aeneid, which is it's extremely difficult to parse, but I mean, so much of it resembles Buddhist thought, Eastern thought, even Vedic kind of ideas. And that's not to say that I believe Plotinus to be the genesis point of Gnosticism or even Plato, but it's just an interesting kind of through line. Again, all these things converging in this area, right? Alexandria, really, in Egypt, where all these learned people were going to exchange academia and this spiritual pursuit, the temples, they were intertwined. So it was a study of everything. And so these ideas, I think, were modernized. They were brought to the fore again in this place and time. But if you even look at, for me, the Platonic dialogues are mystical. I think you're not taught them that way in school, but when you read them, they are mystical documents, especially if you're reading the Greek. But the interesting thing, the interesting thing is that Pythagoras, Solon, Thales, Plato, right, the greatest minds of ancient Greece, they're attested to on the historical record by other philosophers. Like, no, our smartest guys learned all this stuff in Egypt. Mm-hmm. They went over there and learned it there. That's where, and they came back transformed into these quasi wizards.
Yeah, it was really wild, and I love you brought that up, Ike, about reading Plato mystically, because I think the problem with with scholarship up to the last 30 years is that philosophically people tended to just read Plato at face value when they neglect that throughout Platonism's vast history. Everybody said Plato had two doctrines, an exoteric and an esoteric, during his lifetime and after his school, right? So I think now that's kind of changing, and that's where things like the Schwepp and the scholars that Earl has on is really helpful, because we take an intro to philosophy class in school, and we just learn about the forms and all this stuff, and the cave, all that stuff, but like we don't understand that these later people like Plotinus, Porphyry, Iamblichus, where did they get this idea? And I think the idea in scholarship for a long time was that it was just an aberration, for quote unquote lack of a better term. I think John Dillon in his book The Middle Platonists called it the Platonic underworld, where it's like these things were like underground, like the Chaldean oracles and the Gnostic, for lack of a better term, text and the Hermetic stuff. And these are like almost embarrassing, right? For scholars. But now we have to realize that, like, no, these are all, and that's the point of my show, right? Everything's just together. I don't privilege this version of Christianity or Gnosticism over this text by Lucian of Samosata. It's all in the same kind of atmosphere, in the same melting pot. And but as far as like a genetic link between India and just reincarnation in general, I mean, we know that there was a kingdom, Bactria, right? A Hellenistic kingdom that was, basically there right near India, and especially Alexander the Great nearly got there. So, it would make sense that there'd be an exchange of ideas, but like, I think it just comes from that Pythagorean, for lack of a better term, shamanistic tradition that you get carried over in people like Iamblichus, who are writing things like Life of Pythagoras. And then you have stories by Eunapius of these later guys like levitating 10 feet off the ground and stuff like that, and visiting the moon and coming back. So wild stuff that they don't teach you in Intro to Philosophy. But that's there. And this just kind of reminds me just the Gnostic and the links between this Neoplatonic mysticism. There's a great book that Dylan Burns turned me on to called The Sethian Gnostic Background to Plotinus's Mysticism by a scholar who sadly passed, named Zeke Mazer. And he argues that Plotinus at a time was familiar with these Sethian groups, because in the text, the fragments we have, Plotinus goes, "My friends, the Gnostics."
Right.
So so he just goes and he argues very interestingly. I don't know if I'm completely convinced, but he says that Plotinus got that basic kind of mystical foundation in his own thought from these common kind of sources you find in what's called Sethian Gnosticism. So
Yeah,
it's
Dylan Burns
very
makes the argument too, and did God care? Yeah, he's
oh my
he's
gosh.
answering the Gnostics most of the time, the Sethian.
Oh my God, Dylan's a rock star. I need to have him back on. I love him so much.
Yeah, and
yeah. I'll shut up now, but yeah.
Yeah, wasn't it said that the Gnostics they're actually Gnostics in Plotinus's sessions?
Yes,
Yeah,
the
they're his
Sethians
friends.
are there.
Yeah.
Is the books against the Gnostics. I can't remember if that's is that book 3 of the Enneads?
I don't remember.
But he's arguing. It's because we got to remember the text we have of Plotinus was put together by Porphyry, so we don't know what order or whatever when they were all written. But he does he wrote, and not only he, but he encouraged others of his students to write these texts that are now lost against the Sethians. So if they're just this inconsequential kind of group that's like hating the world and being by themselves, then how do they even know about them? Why are they even responding to them if they don't matter? So, just another thing to keep in mind. So.
Yeah, I wanted to throw in a couple cents on the whole possible transmit of from Buddhism to the Greeks and to the West, and that's Alexander did indeed conquer the very northwest part of India. He did conquer there. That's when he stopped and went back. But so many of these scholars, like Pythagoras, not only did they go to Egypt, they also went to Babylon. And now it's just where does Babylon and the Chaldeans and the Magi and some of the Persian aspects fit into the whole East versus West paradigm? Because they're almost a no man's land in the middle if you consider China and India as the East. So tagging out on that.
No, I love that, Graham. Can I add something to that, Miguel? I'm sorry. My brain's just going. Yeah, we got to remember also at this time, when these writers like a Diogenes Laertius or Diodorus of Sicily talk about, well, Plato went to Egypt or he went to the Chaldeans to get the knowledge. This is part of a trope that was really popular in writing at the time, like this 1st century BCE to like 4th century Common Era. It's like a kitsch thing. It's like it's called ancient barbarian wisdom, and it gives your thought authority. It gives your thought authority, and not only that, if you say Plato is the best, because that was kind of the consensus. Plato wasn't the first, but he put everything together the best, right? And that's why he's the best. Well, people like the Sethian Gnostics are like, yeah, but we got these guys, like I got this dude named Zostrianos and Marsanes and Seth, and they're before the flood, and they have the same wisdom. So I think they're a little bit better, and they trump Plato, and that's what ticked off people like Plotinus and especially Porphyry about this. That they said, maybe Plato's not the end all be all of this stuff, and there's other. And the problem, that was the problem, the knowledge, the other kinds of knowledge, right, Miguel, that Dylan talks about.
Right.
That's the problem with that they had. That it wasn't reached through like a contemplative thing like Plotinus's system. It was reached through like a revelatory Hebrew,
an apocalypse,
eschatological, apocalyptic way, right? So that was
they were shitting, and they were shitting on the philosophical method and all that.
They're like, how dare you say Plato isn't a saint, so but yeah, I'll tag out on that. Sorry, Graham brought it up, and it's Graham's fault, so
it always is.
As interesting as all this is, I have to question the question, because we're always wondering, well, where did Gnosticism come from, and was this related to that? But if there's any truth, real truth, to any of these paths, it comes from somewhere else, not just by verbal and written passing on from generation to generation. It comes from the beyond to each generation. And then we come up with the stories and we come up with the systems and so forth. So I'll tag out on that.
That's a fantastic point. And that's kind of the way I see Gnosticism, is just kind of reappearing, you know, and us having to, because like you're saying, it's personal wisdom that sort of transcends discursive reasoning and rote memorization. And I would venture to agree that it's definitely of a spiritual, or at least supra mundane nature. So yeah, it almost, like you're saying, it comes from the other side of the veil. Really, that's where it comes from.
It's eternal. Well, awesome. Well, I think we're close to 2 hours, so we probably should wrap it up. This has been a great discussion. It has flown. I guess there's one last super chat. Thank you very much, Philosophical Minds Podcast. Unless I'm missing something, Vance. But yeah. The discussion has been great. I love the comments, such intelligent comments in the Chatico. But we'll sign off. So everybody, if you'll just, again, say who you are and send people to your podcast or YouTube channel, because, again, you'll find so much about Gnosticism and these other, as I call them, spiritual off-worlders from Alexandria. Well, again, like last time, Ike, sign off and tell people where to go one more time.
Thanks for having me so much, Miguel. Thank you, Vance, and thanks everybody else participating in this talk. My name is Ike Baker. I host the Arcanum podcast and YouTube channel. You can get all my stuff, the podcast, the presentation style, documentary style stuff, as well as my blog, etc., on ikebaker.com.
Awesome. Yeah, he just did an interview with the great Mark Stavish, so you definitely want to check out, because Mark's always so full of Gnosis. Speaking of font, Alex, you want to tell people where to go?
Sure. You guys, anybody can go to my website. It's theaeoni.com. And you can also go to another website I set up. It's called themagusaeon.substack.com. So you can go on there, because I have like a whole new series of articles on that one. But I am trying to make a whole series where people can subscribe, but I'll be putting on more premium content, like stuff that I had never published before. So I'm going to put it on there. So hopefully I'll create like a subscriber base for that. So we'll see how that works out.
So what's your latest series about?
The next one's called The Infinity Working. So it's basically like a Kabbalistic sequel to this one, The Sun Lady Unveiled.
Yeah.
But I mean, it kind of builds on off the conclusions of that book. But it's just a lot of my but it's really more very much into Kabbalah quite a bit, yeah, and then magic and all that kind of stuff. But we'll see how it goes.
Cool. Look forward to it. Yeah. All right, Lord Sobek, who's not Lord Sobek. We actually will be dealing with that god next week in our show, but go ahead.
Yeah, he's the god of appetite. How can you not? The Lord of semen, right? How can you not love that?
Exactly.
Two
yeah.
things I
Lord
love:
of
sex and
God
food.
of
So
buffet.
like that works. So, but yeah. First off, I want to say it was great to meet you, Alex. It was great to meet you, Ike. Moondog, pleasure. Great discussion. Graham, always an honor. Miguel, thank you for inviting me to the virtual Alexandria. I don't know how much I added, but thank you for listening to my long-winded, babblings and my show. I'm just gonna, I guess, if you're okay with it, I'll put it in the chat.
Of course. Yeah, please do. Yeah.
So my show is called We Are Being Transformed. As I said, we just discussed a myriad of topics in antiquity. I don't take it too seriously. I don't care about views or patrons or anything like that. I don't know if you've ever seen The Office, but I kind of look at my show as like a version of the Finer Things Club, when Pam and Oscar and Toby created the Finer Things Club, and they kind of meet and talk about art and stuff and books, and that's kind of how I view it. It's just, for me, a little fun thing.
Yeah.
Because
great treasure trove.
I really love this stuff, and I can't shut up about it. So everybody's like, well, you should just do a podcast, right?
Yeah.
So you can shut up and stop talking to me about stuff I don't understand. But So I bug scholars and they come on. Yesterday I had Daniel Ogden on again. We talked about werewolves.
Oh, cool.
This Tuesday I have David Brackey coming on to talk about demons versus monks, with a huge emphasis on Shenouti the Great and desert monasticism in Egypt. You love that stuff. Speaking of Gnosis, by the way, that's got a lot of Gnosis. So yeah, just come by if you'd like. I don't just cover Gnosticism; I cover the classics. I've covered Lucian, just literature. I'm talking to Robin Faith Walsh again in a couple of months about. We're just going to talk about like our favorite classics like Petronius and Lucian. We're just gonna shoot the shit, and it's gonna be like Nirvana going on in concert and not playing "Smells Like Teen Spirit." We're just gonna piss everybody off who wants to hear about the mind blowing secrets of early Christianity.
Yeah.
Have you completely blown away, and all this clickbait crap is just talk to scholars and talk about werewolves and talk about Sethia Gnosticism with Dylan Burns and all kinds of really cool stuff with a man I've come to consider not only a mentor and a teacher, but a friend, Matthew David Litwa. So
Good man.
He's pretty much like him and Dr. Sledge are the twin the Mega Powers. You remember wrestling in the 80s, like Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage. Like that's how I sold it to them. I'm like, you're my Hulk Hogan, you're my Randy Savage, and you guys are the faces. So they believed in me, and but yeah, like I would love to see y'all. I think I'm at 800 subscribers. Anytime I get the super chats, if I do, it will all go to the scholars. It will not go to me because I don't care about money. I just care about talking about this stuff because I love it. So as you guys have heard, I'm just like, I can't shut up. So I apologize, but at the same time, thank you, Miguel, for the opportunity, and I hope to come back sometime.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I need to get Robin on the show. It's overdue, and obviously Justin just cracks me up. Intelligent, but I love every one of his every one of his dad jokes. I just laugh my ass off.
Oh, I need to make this into a short where he talks about the Nephilim and the Watchers as like Beavis and Butthead. Because we think of the Watchers like now as like these scary, satanic, Luciferian monsters.
Right,
but, like,
right.
in the text themselves, they're like these bumbling teenagers who are like just eating everybody's stuff and like staying up late and causing problems. And he's like, yeah, they're basically just like Beavis and Butthead. They're not really like these scary satanic guys at all. So
well, they're closer to
Yaldabaoth
awesome than the bumbling archons.
Trying to blow into Adam the breath of life, and they're just like huffing and puffing. Justin's a riot. He's a great guy. Love Justin. Love Litwa. Love. I'm sorry, guys, but my favorite's Dylan Burns. Still, he's like my Brock Lesnar, I guess, my special attraction. I just love him. I love all the scholars. Don't get me wrong, but Dylan's just fantastic.
And Dylan loves the Sethian, so I love Dylan too.
Yeah, just come by, say hi, or not. I'm very punk rock, so I'm like, yeah, if you want to watch, you can watch. If you don't, I'll still be doing it. So, thank you.
Awesome. Well, Graham, thank you for coming by, and again, tell us what we have in store. Again, I want to deal with your theories of how Christianity started. Are you with us, Graham? Did the hurricane get you? Yeah, did
unmute
DeSantis arrest you? What happened? I don't know. I can't think of any other Florida.
No, I'm back.
Oh, good.
I forgot to hit which mute button. So it's always great to be here at the library. I'm going to see if how your security is, see if I can smuggle some scrolls out on the way. Great to meet Ike and Alex again. Always great to see Vance, and can't recommend Jason's channel highly enough. I think I was probably within the first 10 subscribers if I had to guess. But
Graham, if I had one subscriber and you were the only one, I'd be happy. I don't need anybody more than Graham and everybody else who comes to that channel. The first, if I had 5 subscribers, I'd be happy. I happen to have 800 for some reason. I don't know why, but Graham is amazing. I love everything he brings to the table. Always love to talk to him about stuff. So
Oh, you're too flattering. You're too flattering. But yeah, no, I got some stuff going on with Miguel here. We're trying to figure out how to best put it together. I did a bunch of writing on my Homo Divinus project that it's still up on Reddit. I did that in 2019, 2020. I lost control of that account probably early 2022. So I can't add anything more there. And I'm moving the my snippets over to a Discord channel, which is available to Miguel's Patreons. And I pop up here and there, like this time, and I'll probably have some more presentations with Miguel. Weekly, I do a history of philosophy without any Yeps podcast with a couple of friends of mine, one from Portugal and one from South Africa. We'll do another one tomorrow morning. And my cat is asking for food right now, so I'm going to tag out. Always great to be here. Catch you next time.
All right, thanks, Graham. And last but not least, the Moondog. Thanks for being here, Vance, and keeping the world together.
It's great. Gathered among the sparks here, the divine sparks.
We're one primal man. Adam
We're all
Cadman.
tagging out. I just want to know who's got the folding chair.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. To the audience, thank you very much. You're amazing. Again, we'll have a show on the first female pharaoh. We'll have a show on the Orphic mysteries and texts coming soon. So we got a lot of good stuff coming. Please support AM Byte. Support all these independent creators. Don't waste your mind in corporate bullshit and misinformation out there. This is where we win. We win with the Gnosis, finding out who we are, writing our own gospel, and living our own myth. Have a good weekend, and everybody take care. Thank you.